Pope Francis is not just the papacy, although the word papacy implies the office of the Pope. But we know that this is a system that runs its tentacles out through the entire world, just as Putin might be trying to do with his Russian empire. This man is nearly 85 years old. You will know that about July the 10th, he went into hospital for 10 days to have half his colon removed. He might seem a frail man, but he's been the Pope since 2013, and he has taken the papacy in a very clear direction. In a sense, he's a complete diversion from his predecessor, Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, and he has followed on the work of John the 23rd and Vatican II in the early 60s, and the work of John Paul II. The Vatican needed a change because their stocks around the world were so bad through the sex abuse scandals. They picked this man to resurrect their position. And what a work he is doing. Now, the papacy is not just one man, it's the flow of popes that uphold that system. And the goal of every pope is to appoint enough cardinals that when the next election is held for a pope through the conclave, that is, all the cardinals under 80 are viewed as incompetent, all the cardinals under 80 will gather together and hopefully elect another pope in the likeness of the current pope. Now, the power of the papacy is considerable, although he does not have unfettered rule. So Pope Francis has been trying to get legitimacy for same-sex unions for many years. 2020 he came out and made yet another statement about his desire to see recognition for same-sex marriages. And yet the African wing of the church is very large, very conservative, and will not accept the idea. So again this year he had to come out and confirm the official line of the church was marriage was between a man and a woman. So he does have his setbacks, but nevertheless he has power that many dictators would love to have, and amongst his power is that no one is going to boot him out of office. Now, the prophet Daniel spoke about the power of this system in Daniel chapter 2. Let's turn back there briefly to remind ourselves of what Daniel saw. And Daniel saw a fourth great beast. He saw in the night vision of verse 7 of Daniel 7, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. And we know that there's multiple phases. But the dominant feature of this beast is it is Roman. I start to hear talks and articles in our Christadelphian magazines when it's as if the metal in the feet is aluminium or some other metal. But it's Roman. It has to be Roman influence in this great fourth beast. And Daniel considered in verse 8, and there came up another little horn, or as Bullinger puts it in Companion Bible, a horn of small beginnings. And it plucked out 3 horns of the 10 European horns, the Lombards, Vandals and Huns, and up came this new horn, a new power. And the dominant features of this power were its mouth, which spoke great things, and its eyes. And it was given this role of wearing out the saints of the Most High for 1,260 years. Now let's pick up the following features of the little horn. Obviously, it's part of the Roman beast. It's continuation of that Roman influence. The most obvious features are the Holy See, by which it would see all things. And the Pope has the grandest network of spies around the world feeding back intelligence to the Vatican. And a mouth that would speak great things against the Most High. And Daniel observes this in the 20th verse a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And in verse 25, he shall speak great words against the Most High. Or, to use New Testament language, he would blaspheme. He would speak against God himself. And when we come to Thessalonians, we understand what he spoke, because he put himself in the place of God. He would make war with the saints in verse 21. Important when we come to the book of Revelation, because we find this system has drunk the blood of the saints. But it exists until finally in verse 22, the Ancient of Days came, judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the saints possessed the kingdom. There is the blessing. This system is going. Just an indication of the power of the papacy. When you become a bishop of the Roman Catholic Church, this is the promise you make. I vow that I will always be faithful to the Catholic Church and to the Pope as its supreme pastor, vicar of Christ, successor to St. Peter, the apostle, in the primacy and head of the College of Bishops. I will obey the free exercise of the primatial authority of the Pope over the entire Church and diligently support and defend his laws and authority. Do you see the word God? I will obey God. Do you see that I will read the Bible and faithfully follow the instructions of the Scriptures? No, I will obey faithfully. Now, the Pope we have at the moment is the first Jesuit Pope. And you say, well, the Jesuits have only been around 500 years. Sure. But in 500 years, there's never been a Jesuit Pope. And the Jesuits of all the orders of the Catholic Church are absolutely behind the Pope. The founder of the Jesuits, Ignatius of Loyola, once said that if the Pope says white is black, then it is black. In other words, ignore the logic, ignore the evidence, the Pope is always right. Now, the Pope sustains his power through a very complex organisation. He has a College of Cardinals, he has a Secretariat of State, and then he has the Roman Curia with its 5 areas, which is his government, through which he rules the provinces of the world and all the areas of his rulership. Now, we know that the power of this was outlined by the Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2, nearly 2,000 years ago. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2, the man of sin. And here were some in the Thessalonian ecclesia imagining that Christ might come very quickly, and the apostle has to tell them in verse 2 that they be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit nor by word nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. It cannot come yet, says the apostle, even though in verse 1 he beseeches them by the coming of the Lord and their gathering together unto him. It can't come until we know in verse 3 there's a falling away first. And he describes the qualities of this apostasy. And I have 11 points, which Brother Brian gave me many years ago. If you pick up Ron Abel's book, The Man of Sin, he has 21 identifying factors between 2 Thessalonians 2 and the Pope. It's headed up by a notable individual called in verse 3, the man of sin. He is born for destruction. He is the son of destruction. In verse 3, this one comes. In verse 4, he's going to show himself as to be God. And the term Antichrist is now understood in the Brotherhood to mean against Christ. But Brother Thomas said it meant instead of Christ. Indeed, if you consult a Bible lexicon, you'll find both meanings, against Christ and instead of Christ. that the Pope very clearly sees himself as instead of Christ. He represents Christ on earth. It is clearly a religious system in verse 4. It is worshipped. It exists in a temple, not only just the physical temple of the Vatican buildings in Rome, but all the buildings around the earth and in the structures that he rules by. It has been a subject of continuous warning, says Paul. Did I not tell you, verse 5, about these things? And we can refer back to Acts 20. From the Ephesian elders would arise false teachers. This emergence of falsehood from within the true brotherhood. It existed in Paul's day, but in verse 7 it was now being withheld. And we've always understood that as the Roman pagan empire was holding it back. But Brother Roberts tells us to keep in mind that it was also the presence of the ecclesia of Christ that held back this apostasy. It will be destroyed by Christ, verse 8. It claims to work miracles, verses 9 and 10, and we've always described the incredible signs that this system puts to itself. And it's immensely popular. And its popularity it uses to deceive the people of the world. And in verses 10 to 13, we have this contrast, brothers and sisters and young people, between deception of the wickedness of the Roman Catholic Church and the truth of Christ. So Paul writes in verse 10, in the end of verse 9, it's got lying wonders, pseudo-signs. In verse 10, it comes with deceivableness of unrighteousness, because they do not love the truth. So you accept unrighteousness or you accept the truth. And then in verse 13, he talks about the belief of the truth. Instead, those who follow this system, in verse 11, believe a lie. So the Apostle John had already prophesied of Antichrist, which existed in his day, and already there were many antichrists. An antichrist, as predicted by the apostles, coming from the believers, manifest that they are not of us, but yet they have not displayed their true colours. And from the 2nd century, it has been clearly understood this system of iniquity that would arise. So take the number of the beast in Revelation 13, 666. Is this incapable of comprehension? Well, Irenaeus, less than 70 years after John was dead, said the name Latinos contains the number 666. They are the Latins who now reign. In other words, this is going to be a Roman edifice, and this system of iniquity will be Roman. Hippolytus, a bit later around the year 200, wrote, "It is manifest to all that the rulers are now Latins, Latinoi, transmuted therefore into the name of one man, it becomes Latinos." This is a very ancient understanding. It was not a mystery to anyone. And yet, what's happened in the ongoing 1900 years since John? A gentleman called Bernard Begin, in his book Antichrist, 2,000 Years of the Human Fascination with Evil, writes, after Vatican II, early 1960s, traditional Lutheran and Reformed claims that the Pope was Antichrist have been either forgotten or explicitly rejected. Even the evangelical fundamentalists, for whom Antichrist is certainly alive and well, have been uncomfortable with a papal Antichrist. So we're not prepared to see 2 Thessalonians 2 as a papal Antichrist. It doesn't suit the age anymore. I remember having a coffee with a Lutheran minister who was so incensed that the Australian Lutherans sold out to the Catholics. And he could not believe that they even sold out on transubstantiation, which Luther himself had so violently opposed, that the bread and wine as symbols were the literal flesh and blood of Jesus Christ. He could not believe it. Now, I find in our own community, we seem to be wandering from this clear understanding of 2 Thessalonians 2. I ask you, if you don't have a copy, to pick up a copy of Ron Abel's The Man of Sin from Brother David for a mere $4.40, less than a cup of coffee. And if you don't have $4.40, then you can Google a 2003 article by Brother Taran Tapouris in The Lampstand, where he very clearly, in an article, The Man of Sin, puts the clear facts of the case. Now, if you buy Brother Ron's book, you can see this cartoon. Now, this cartoon is very pertinent to the current circumstance, because what was the gift, I use the word sarcastically, what was the gift of the Jesuits to the Christadelphians? The gift was a false interpretation of prophecy. That is what the Jesuits gave us. If you can follow this cartoon, on the centre left is the Pope. And he's saying, I am Jesus Christ in flesh. Around him we have all the passages we've talked about, Daniel 7 and 8, 2 Thessalonians 2, Revelation 17 and 18. And along the bottom are all the Protestants, Wycliffe, Tyndale, Sir Isaac Newton, and various others. And they are shooting at the Pope. And if you can see the weapons down at the bottom, the weapons are called the revealed, can't even read it myself, revealed determination, the revealed will of God. And they're shooting at the Pope. And up here, we have two groups trying to stop them. In the corner, we have the Ribeiras, the Jesuits of the 16th century. And they're saying, hey, stop, don't shoot the Pope. He's not the real Antichrist. The Antichrist is in the future, he's beyond. And over on the top left, we have someone who looks a bit like Napoleon, who's some Antichrist who's coming in the future. This is the current thinking. I remember Chris and Martha Sales, when they read Left Behind, saying, perhaps the only doctrine all the churches will believe when Christ returns is that Antichrist will stand up in Jerusalem. Everyone loves this doctrine. Antichrist is still to come. Next to the followers of Ribeira are the followers of Alcazar. Now, he was a preterist interpreter of Revelation, which meant he thought much of it happened before the year AD 70. And in the bottom right-hand corner is somebody who looks like a Caesar, and that's probably the Antichrist. Don't shoot the Pope, he's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist has already been. He was destroyed in AD 70. If you want to read the cartoon, you'll have to buy the book. And there's another cartoon in Brother Ron's book, the Roman Catholic merry-go-round. And here are all the Antichrists on the carousel. If you believe in the AD 70 theory, you've got Judas, Nero, maybe they're the Antichrist. If you want a modern Antichrist, on the left, we've got Mussolini and Napoleon. On the right, we've got a Russian commie. I don't think they like being called that anymore, but... And on the right, we've got a fundamentalist future Antichrist detective who says, I don't know what the Antichrist is. And who's turning the whole carousel? The Jesuits, Pope Francis and his friends. As Brother Ron said, the ultimate tragedy is that Christadelphian authors today are now drawing in these Jesuit ideas of Ribeira and Alcazar. That must be the ultimate victory for the Jesuits, apart from taking the papacy. Let sober exposition abound, and may every brother and sister be careful before they put away our treasured pioneer expositions. So what do we know about these Jesuits? Well, many of us heard the Jesuit oath, the most bloodthirsty sort of promise you could make, and they say, oh no, that was a long way in the past. They do have an oath still today. Jesuit education, they control thousands of universities and institutions. In the United States, Fordham University and Georgetown University are Jesuit strongholds. And the principal of a very rich school in Sydney called Ignatius College Riverview, Jesuit school, says, "The promotion of our service and justice in our communities, in our world, is a distinguishing feature of Jesuit spirituality." Note those words, we're about service and justice. That comes from Pope Francis. On the Australian Jesuits website, it says, "We are called to the frontiers. Jesuit priests and brothers are men on the move, ready to do anything or go anywhere to spread the good news of Jesus Christ in our world." And I remember being in a hotel in Ningbo in China, and in the morning I opened the curtains and that was the panorama before me, Our Lady, the Assumption Cathedral, where they still say the Latin Mass. And I always wondered, why was Pope Francis so worried about his 12 million Catholics in China? Because this was one of the many works of the Jesuits. Spanish Jesuit Father Rodrigo de Figueroa, sorry about my Spanish, in 1628, an Italian Jesuit Father Joannes Montero in 1640 took Jesuit teaching to China. And of course there was Francis Xavier who flooded the Philippines with it, and many others who took it to South America. It was the Jesuits who went anywhere spreading their gospel. Well, in the secret history of the Jesuits, in the foreword, this is what the writer said. Ignatius de Loyola created the Jesuits to secretly accomplish two major goals for the Roman Catholic institution: universal political power and a universal church. Now you might think that's not possible, but I wish to illustrate this afternoon that's exactly where this system is trying to go. In this quite old book now, All Roads Lead to Rome, by Michael de Semlin, a British Protestant, he writes, "Freemasonry and Catholicism, freed from the difficulties of the past, can share a common goal in overseeing one world faith." Well, that was back at the times when Freemasonry was big in the Catholic Church, but certainly Catholicism has this goal of one world faith. And I assure you, this is the goal of Pope Francis. Now, if we turn to Revelation 16, which Brother Tony has already directed our minds to, we know about the three croaks coming, three unclean spirits like frogs emerging from the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet in verse 13. They are spirits of madness, working miracles to draw all nations to the battle of the great day of God Almighty, called in verse 16 Armageddon. Now in Helpers Israel, Brother Thomas writes, they are spirits or influences exerted through the policy of the three governments, and unclean because nothing clean can proceed out of such mouths. The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, as he calls them using cities, Rome, Vienna, and Constantinople, are so many centres of intrigue, whence proceeds the evil that is to ruin the beast. From these are to go forth to the kings of the earth and to the kings of the whole habitable the results of the intrigues which will stir up all their propensities to war. So as we're listening to Brother Tony's words and the deceit of Putin, we have this intrigue that is working. And we want to just concentrate for a few minutes on the intrigue of the papacy. Now, if you go to a dictionary and you look up this word Jesuit, it will tell you, yes, this is a society, the Society of Jesus, founded by St. Ignatius Loyola in 1534, devoted to missionary and educational work. That definition on the left is taken from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and there is a second meaning for this word Jesuit, one given to intrigue or equivocation. So we have a pope who comes from a system or order of the Society of Jesus, which is given to intrigue or equivocation. On the right-hand side, we have the Oxford English Dictionary, which again, definition 1, a follower or member of the Society of Jesus. Definition 2, a dissembling person, a prevaricator. You're all intelligent people, you know what dissembling means. It's a hypocrite who pretends one thing and does another. And I suggest there cannot be a better word to describe the behaviour of Pope Francis. Now, in prophetical terms, the Pope seems to have two tasks. Task 1 is to declare a holy war, sanctify war. It will undoubtedly be the Pope that calls upon all nations to invade Israel, to go to Jerusalem, to fight for the holy places there. After Armageddon, he will have a central role of opposing Christ, who rides on the white horse. And in Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20, we have the presence of the Pope. The beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, the system of the Roman Catholic Church that wrought miracles before him, with which he had deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. And the false prophet was cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. Now, the qualities of this system are described to John in chapter 17. And he is told to come hither. He will be shown in verse 1 of chapter 17, the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. I want you to see, John, the greatness of the judgment that will fall upon this system. She sits upon many waters. She is influential across the nations. She has a cup of fornication. She has many harlot daughters, and she's murdered the saints. Verse 6, she's got a cup full of the blood of saints, just as Daniel 7 had also predicted. Now, I want you to think about this. She has a cup, and she commits fornication. Verse 2, the kings of the earth have committed fornication. They have been evilly involved to their own gratification with the Roman Catholic Church. Now, in chapter 2, verse 20, in the first century, Jezebel was teaching the pure saints of Christ fornication. When we come to the end days, in Revelation 17, the kings of the earth are willingly committing fornication with this system. And we are told in verse 2, the dwellers on the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. And Brother Thomas in Eureka lists 17 ingredients of this wine in the false doctrine that it's giving people to drink. Now, when you read the earth in verse 2, kings of the earth, the dwellers on the earth, we are principally reading about the central heartland of Europe. Remember, that's where the beast of the earth came from. Nevertheless, when we get to chapter 18 and verse 3, all nations have drunk of her wine. And it's called in chapter 18 verse 3, the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now, if you're carefully doing your daily readings, you might have noticed in Jeremiah 25 verse 15, when the kings of the surrounding land are given cups of wine, that Jeremiah calls it the wine cup of Yahweh's fury. And in Jeremiah 51 verse 7, in a prophecy of Babylon, it's called the cup at Yahweh's hand. So they seem to be willingly drinking it, but they're willingly taking this cup because Yahweh wants them to drink it, that he might bring his judgments upon them. In chapter 18 verse 3, the end of that verse says, the merchants are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies, which Brother Thomas translates as the potency of her voluptuousness. The word abundance is just the standard word dunamis, the strength of her delicacies. And Vine translates this word delicacies as insular luxury. She draws the nations in through the luxuries she offers. This noun is found as a verb both in verse 7 and verse 9. They have lived luxuriously with this system, drawing strength from it and the system from them. Now, this system, brothers and sisters, is a thoroughly corrupt system. It's corrupt morally, it's corrupt financially. You may have heard of this case that's been launched over the last fortnight against these 10 wonderful people from the Vatican who are up for embezzling vast sums of money. They bought a building in London for hundreds of millions of dollars or euros, and now it's not worth very much at all, and now they've been hauled to court for embezzling money. The lady on the left, Cecilia Moragna, she only spent some of the money on designer handbags and luxurious shoes, even though she acknowledges the money was given to try and rescue nuns and priests from foreign governments. And the fellow on the right, Angelo Becciuri, was a cardinal. He still is a cardinal. He was the Pope's right-hand man. But he's had his finger in the trough, his nose in the trough, that's the right metaphor, isn't it? He's had his nose in the trough well and truly. He's been drawing millions of euros off this system. And then they lost a whole lot of money because the building in a luxurious section of London is not worth as much as they paid for it. Financial corruption in the Vatican just keeps going on and on and on. But what's the Pope doing? Well, he's out there selling himself as a good Jesuit, as an internationalist, a universalist. That has always been the Jesuit creed. He goes to the United Nations as previous popes, but he is more intense on spreading his power and influence than perhaps any pope that has gone before. In a recent bulletin in Bible in the News, Brother Daniel Billington sketched the key powers of the world and their rulers. United States has Joe Biden, a Catholic. Russia, Putin, Russian Orthodox. Xi Jinping's the standout number 3, he's an atheist. Germany currently has Angela Merkel, a Lutheran. United Kingdom has Boris Johnson, the first christened Catholic to be Prime Minister of England. France has Emmanuel Macron, who says he's agnostic, but we'll talk about him later. Justin Trudeau, Catholic, and Mario Draghi has this year become the Prime Minister of Italy, a Jesuit. So there he is, the Jesuit dragon, Mario Draghi, very smart Italian economist, claimed he saved the euro under his motto, whatever it takes, which is a good Jesuit motto. And he's now the Prime Minister of Italy, and he and the Pope are talking, not always harmoniously, but clearly there is great communication between these people. As for Emmanuel Macron, I'm an agnostic, folks. Yes, I did study at a Jesuit school, and I did marry my teacher, Jesuit teacher, Brigitte. He's much older than me, but no, I'm an agnostic. Does he look like he's the sort of chap that might actually listen to the Pope? I think so. Well, here's another possible king of the earth. This is Armand Laschet, who is up for election as the Chancellor of Germany next month when Angela Merkel steps down. Some people say he might not get elected, but as a CDU candidate, he is most likely to get elected. What do we know about this man? Well, he was born in Aachen, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, the Charlemagne territory. There is a statue of Charlemagne and a cathedral dedicated to Charlemagne in Aachen. And as a good man from Aachen, he speaks both French and German. He can unite these together. But he is a very good Catholic. Not a Jesuit, but he was the editor of a Catholic newspaper and his father-in-law's Catholic publishing house. He got a medal this year from the Catholic Order of Malta for his political actions, always based on Christian values. And according to an article in the Irish Times in June, he says, Catholics have a drive to shape things on a global level. Embedded in the papacy, we are rarely nationalists. We will commit fornication with the great harlot. I'll put the papacy above Germany if I'm elected Chancellor. That's this man. As for Boris Johnson, we didn't know much about his Catholicism until he got married in this church, Westminster Catholic Cathedral. And some of the local constituents were rather aghast. Here's Boris on his third marriage. How can he get married in there? And I'm a good Catholic, I can't get married. And the local bishop said, well, Boris has never been married in a Catholic church, so he's quite free to come in here. And he's got 6 kids, at least 6 kids, and the 7th on the way, but we won't worry about any of that. Welcome, Boris. What about the US? Papacy is an ardent Catholic. Biden is an ardent Catholic. And when he shifted from Delaware to Washington, he decided to choose to go to a Jesuit church. And although the American bishops are saying he shouldn't get communion because he's not hard enough against abortion, the word is coming from Rome. Don't you touch our friend Joe. Joe is also, clearly, if you look at the facts, been a good friend of Israel from 1973 as a young senator. He was with Golda Meir just before the Yom Kippur War. And Golda Meir said to this young senator, don't you worry about the war, young man. We have got a force you don't understand. We're Israelis. We've got nowhere to go. We will fight. He also has his 2 children married to Jews, and he has his vice president is married to a Jew. And he hasn't been to the Vatican yet. Who does he send along? Down the bottom, Anthony Blinken, his Jewish Secretary of State. And you look at the US, the Catholics have got incredible control, even in the Supreme Court. Further north, and Jesuits to boot, occupying the places, the 9 places in the Supreme Court. A couple of Jews, but most of the rest are Catholics and Jesuits. Justin Trudeau, schooled in a Jesuit school. The Mexican president, Jesuit. Indonesia, President Moon Jae-in of Korea is a Catholic. Lee Hsien Loong, the Prime Minister of Singapore, I don't think is a Catholic, but he went to a Catholic school. There he is with 10,000 Catholics celebrating the great contribution of Catholicism to the Singapore society. This system reaches out its tentacles into all the world. The kings of the earth commit fornication with the harlot. And here he is, the man who wants to be the most popular ruler of the world. Now, I want to speak about this mouth speaking great things. Pope Francis has only written 3 encyclicals so far. The last one, Lumen Fidei, the Light of Faith, was his first in June 29, 2013. In that encyclical, he explains that faith is not an individual thing, it's a collective thing as part of the Roman Catholic Church. And the succession of popes has enabled this faith to be passed down. And we shouldn't be out, as Francis says, proselytising, trying to force people to Christ. We should be evangelising, and people will hail the good Catholic news and become Catholics. It ends with a prayer to Mary, because Jesuits worship Mary, as it's often said, more than they worship God or Christ. The one I want to spend a bit of time on now is the first one on the list, which was issued on the 3rd of October last year, called Fratelli Tutti, on fraternity and social friendship. or Fratelli Tutti translates as all brothers. I suggest to you, brothers and sisters, this is noxious wine that you should not try and sip. And whether it's put up for little kiddies or older people, the doctrine is clear. We are all brothers. Now, I sort of hate to do this, but I want you to listen to one of the prayer requests of Pope Francis about 5 years ago, when he lays out what he means by we are all brothers.
La mayor parte de los habitantes del planeta se declaran creyentes. Esto debería provocar un diálogo entre las religiones. No debemos dejar de orar por él y colaborar con quienes piensan distinto.
Confío en Buda.
Creo en Dios.
Creo en Jesucristo.
Creo en Dios, Alá.
Muchos piensan distinto, sienten distinto, buscan a Dios o encuentran a Dios de diversa manera. En esta multitud, en este abanico de religiones, hay una sola certeza que tenemos para todos. Todos somos hijos de Dios.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Confío en vos para difundir mi petición de este mes. Que el diálogo sincero entre hombres y mujeres de diversas religiones conlleve frutos de paz y justicia. Confío en tu oración.
A Japanese who worships Shinto or a Chinese worshipping Tao, it's irrelevant. We're all brothers of the same God. Religious differences don't really matter. And here's his prayers that are at the end of Fratelli Tutti. The first one, Lord, Father of our human family, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognise the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects and shared dreams. Amen. There's goodness in everybody, even that mass murderer or the terrorist who's just destroyed a building. They're all good. Further, in the ecumenical Christian prayer that follows, O God, Trinity of love, grant that we Christians may live the gospel, discovering Christ in each human being. My Bible says the natural mind, the carnal mind, is in enmity against God. Unless Christ is accepted into our thinking, we are alienated from God, Romans 8. But to him, you can go and find Christ in anyone. You should recognise Christ crucified in the sufferings of the abandoned and forgotten of our world. See some refugee clinging on a lifeboat, that's Christ crucified. And you see Christ risen in each brother or sister who makes a new start. That's the resurrection of Christ. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty, and so on. One human race worshipping one God. So what's the point of religion? Well, this is pinched straight off one of the Vatican websites. There's 3 roles of religion. This is Pope Francis. First role, it creates respect for each human being. Secondly, it's been a source of enlightenment, wisdom and solidarity. Yeah? You go into a Buddhist temple or a Shinto temple or a mosque, you find enlightenment, wisdom and solidarity. Third role of religions, they form an essential role in forming consciences. So the Pope, as he got out of hospital last month, put an end to the Latin Mass because that was dividing the church. And how can you have one big happy worldwide church if you've got some old fellow standing up the front muttering in Latin? It doesn't work. His one world religion extends to Islam. So he went to Abu Dhabi and he signed a document on human fraternity for world peace and living together with the Grand Imam. And in this document, they signed this, the pluralism and the diversity of religions are willed by God in his wisdom. So the fact we've got Islam and Buddhism and Taoism and Judaism and Christianity is the will of God. Really? I've got some verses down the bottom I just picked up in Jeremiah as we're reading it. Jeremiah 12 verse 14 to 17, when the nations have to recognise the folly and to recognise Yahweh alone as their God. Or Jeremiah 16 verse 19, the Gentiles will say, all that our fathers have accepted is lies. He says this declaration may be a sign of the closeness between east and west and between north and south and between all who believe that God has created us to understand one another, cooperate with one another and live as brothers and sisters who love one another. Well, I've got news for him, but there's no unity between east or west and north and south because Yahweh has declared it to be different. The king of the south and king of the north are in antagonism to each other. And as a result of the Abu Dhabi historic covenant with Islam, they planned this building. Have you seen this? On an island in Abu Dhabi, they're building the Abrahamic family home. On the left is a mosque, on the right is a synagogue, and at the rear is a Catholic church. We're all members of the one big Abrahamic faith. Well, some evangelicals didn't like it and told us that this is one world religion of Chrislam. But I think you've got to make it Jew Chrislam. But I don't think it's Chrislam, I think it's popery. That's what this world religion is. He wants to be the head of this world religion. And if you think this is all a myth, well, there's the architect, British Ghanaian Sir David Ajaya, and there's a shot 2 weeks ago. They're building it. The church is a bit behind schedule, but the synagogue and the mosque are going up nicely. Whether it'll be open next year, we will find. This is his truth, the all brothers that Pope Francis believes in. He went to Iraq this year, did the same stuff, met with the Muslims, and we all pray together as one. I can go to earth, the Father Abraham's birthplace, and we could all be together. Brothers and sisters, young people, this is the wine. And if you drink it, you will get terribly drunk. And the Pope has been on this course for many years. Here's a picture of 2007, the 10th anniversary of the United Religions Initiative. This is one world united religion, and who's a key player? Well, centre slightly right is Jorge Maria Bergoglio in his cathedral, the Buenos Aires Metropolitan. On the left is Bishop Swing, the Bishop of California, who is the main driver of this union, and there are people of other faiths. And for 10 years, from when he was a bishop till he was a cardinal, Francis pursued this United Religions Initiative in league with the United Nations. So we probably have seen this picture in the Vatican buildings, and there's a window, and it has Mater Ecclesiae, the mother of all churches. But he just doesn't want to be the mother of the Protestant churches. He wants to be the ruler of all religions. And while you're being drunk with his wine, he clearly wants one world government. In that document, Fratelli Tutti, in clause 172, he says that nation states are becoming weaker because of the power of global companies. We must have a stronger and more efficiently organised institutions with functionaries who are appointed fairly by agreement among national governments and empowered to impose sanctions. Incredible, Pope Francis actually in most of his encyclicals just quotes himself. You don't need any other authority. Sometimes he'll quote Gandhi or whatever, but he likes quoting himself. He says, such an authority ought to promote more effective world organisations equipped with the power to provide for the global common good, the elimination of hunger and poverty, and the sure defence of fundamental human rights. And the next, section 173, is about giving the United Nations real teeth so it can be a global enforcer. That's what he wants, one world government. The other encyclical he wrote, Laudato Si, praise be to him, he wrote based on climate change for a new world system. He writes as an appeal to all people. He doesn't like the current economic systems. He has a great problem with private property, despite that being there in the law of Moses, it would be there in the kingdom, but he doesn't like it. He says, if one person lacks what is necessary to live with dignity, it's because another person is detaining it. So, some person in Myanmar who's going hungry tonight is because you bought a new car yesterday. It's your fault. That's the sort of Pope economics. He is definitely not happy with the economic systems that we use in the West. So I'm not the first person, I think, to use the term the woke Pope, but if you look at his agenda, it's not about changing the world to be ready for Christ or people repenting of their sins. The agenda is war and hunger, poverty, environmental crisis, violence, corruption, the crisis of the family and of the economy, and a lack of hope. Nothing about spirituality, about becoming like Christ. And so he's behind this move called the Great Reset, which is wine that you've never imagined. So they have this body called the Council for Inclusive Capitalism with the Vatican, always with the Vatican. And they're going to improve capitalism. And on the Pope's right-hand side is a woman called Lynn Forrester to Rothschild, and she's married into this immensely rich Jewish family, and she thinks she's going to help him change the world. As Brother Paul Creswell said to me, the Catholics can't even manage the Vatican Bank. How are they going to manage the entire world economy? They haven't got a clue. And you'll find sites, the economy of Francisco, the new economics of Pope Francis. You'll find websites called Eco Jesuits, how we can get rid of climate change by an entire new world. He's got a global compact on education. He's out there spruiking that he is going to set up a new educational system, given that Jesuits are big in education. I've read this document. I don't really know what he wants, except I don't think he wants parents involved in teaching their children. He wants the village, the system, to educate them. Well, brothers and sisters and young people, my question to you, will the Brotherhood drink this wine? The kings of the earth will. The nations of the earth will. We know. Revelation 17:18 says so. Well, I hope not. Again, in Michael de Semlin's book, he writes, we are living in a climate of increasing indifference towards our history. Renewal has rescued the Christians from the past, from all the unpleasantness, the strife and the bloodletting. The old conflicts over doctrine are no longer relevant. Those things which have caused division through the whole Christian era have no place on the agenda today. There is no need to think about them or talk about them or to teach our children about them in school. It is divisive and unloving to do so. Forget about doctrine. Forget about what we teach about the Bible. It is irrelevant. That is the world the Catholic Church wants to sell us. That is the world of Pope Francis. He wants one big happy brotherhood of men, irrespective of what you believe. In a recent exhortation to Chinese brothers and sisters, Brother Peter Heaviside wrote, for centuries it has been the abominable falsehoods of apostate churches, represented by the beast from the sea and the earth, that have warred against the souls of the true disciples of Christ, often leading to physical persecution. And this continues through to our days. Though the manner of the religious warfare has for the most part changed its face, the modern threat is subtler. Rather than the persecution of the past, there is today the loving and peaceful embrace of persuasive arguments for mutual acceptance. That's the wine that the Pope wants to dominate the world through. And Brother Peter wrote to the Chinese brothers and sisters, because yes, they're worried about security with Xi Jinping, but really their greatest enemy is the apostate church and her daughters, who deceives them away. The loving and peaceful embrace. I can tell you, brothers and sisters, that some of our young people, young brothers and sisters, are wooed away by this doctrine of kind actions and universal salvation and universal love. And they think this is good. And if you go down this track, eventually you don't come anymore, because you can serve God in your own home by being a kind person. This is the doctrine of Pope Francis. In conclusion, a quote from Brother Harry Tennant that I got from Brother Ron Cowie, and we don't know exactly when Brother Harry wrote this. But he wrote, "We are not one church among many. We are separate from them. We have no part or lot with them. They are next to no similarities over things that matter. How God judges them is not our concern. They do not believe in the same God as us, the same Jesus Christ, nature of man, salvation, baptism, atonement, or in the same kingdom of God. They do not share the same beliefs regarding warfare, politics, voting, or belief in the devil. In fact, they do not believe the same Bible." And as Pope Francis spreads his wine, universal government, universal church, I pray, brothers and sisters, that we might see the Lord coming and stand firm for the things that we have been taught.